When she's asked a question, if she doesn't know the answer, she just cackles, and that drives me crazy.
Now that President Biden is out of the race, anyone who expects a surge of support for Vice President Harris among Nikki Haley primary voters should temper their expectations. 2 days after President Biden dropped out of the race, we spoke to 14 Haley voters across all the major primary states. We learned that their electoral preferences in 2024 will resemble their choices in 2020, but not exactly. 3 of these 14 voted for Biden in 2020, and the same 3 intend to vote for Harris in November. 8 voted for Trump the last time, and 3 voted third party back then. This time around, disappointed with Trump, these Haley voters would give him just 5 votes, with 5 others going to third party candidates and 1 person not voting. What's the first thing that comes to mind when they think of Vice President Harris?
I would say a feminist.
Sometimes catty.
Giggly.
Coattails.
Liberal.
Word salad.
She's capable.
Interesting.
Condescending.
Flaky or word salad.
Radical.
I want to say intelligent.
Loyal.
Just feels like she's always in the background.
What do they like about her?
Strong, yeah, and wise.
I just like that she's a woman. I think it's time to have a woman in the forefront.
She's not Joe Biden.
I'll say she has an education. I'll give that for her.
I like that she's really pioneering a trail for others to follow in her footsteps.
Gutsy.
I like her background. I like where she's coming from, like past jobs and stuff like that.
10 of the 14 say Harris represents the continuation of Biden's failed policies. Only 4 see her mainly as an alternative to what an unwelcome Trump-Biden rematch would have been. What do they dislike about her specifically?
Yeah, I think she's out of her league.
How she was in charge of the southern border. Like, that was one of the very few things that people knew about her during Biden's presidential run.
The simplistic explanations given when asked about Ukraine and other events, just when I said condescending earlier, that's part of what I meant, just very like 2-year-old level instead of treating people at the same level, I guess.
I don't have a good understanding of her policy views.
So that's one of the things that I dislike about her, is that we don't know enough. She's been vice president for almost 4 years, and we still have no idea what her platform is or what she stands for.
I dislike that when she is asked tough questions, even domestically, but specifically on the international stage, when she gets flustered, she giggles. And I think that is a telling sign to our enemies that they have just made her uncomfortable. And I don't think that you should have a tell like that when you are running for president or are the current seated vice president of the United States.
What stood out in these conversations is how wildly off the mark some of the Republican and Democratic messaging has been when it comes to President Biden's stepping aside. House Speaker Mike Johnson wrote, quote, "If Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. He must resign the office immediately," unquote. By a show of fingers, who agrees with Johnson? None of you.
If he were just a couple of months into his term, I think that would be another thing. I think because we are, he's got 5 months left, that it might cause instability in the country as well as the rest of the world to have a shift to Kamala or whomever, and then another shift come election time.
That means if he steps down, that means Kamala steps in, and she's way more radical than anybody else.
I think part of it has to do with the length that's left on his presidential term. It's about 6, 7 months, and I think he's got the mental faculties to continue that. Plus, I think there's a system of checks and balances and guardrails in place to make sure that he's not making absent-minded decisions.
And this was just as problematic. So Johnson also said the following. He said, quote, having invalidated the votes of more than 14 million Americans who selected Joe Biden to be the Democrat nominee for president, the self-proclaimed party of democracy has proven exactly the opposite. By a show of fingers, who agrees with Johnson on that point? None of you.
I'm not sure what he's trying to say. I mean, he's saying that 14 million votes were invalidated, and I'm not sure why he's saying that. And I just don't know where he's going with that or what the point of it is.
So he's talking about the primary, right? There's 14 million votes for Joe Biden. I think it was like kind of a fake primary anyway. So it's not like even before the primary, people didn't want Joe Biden. I think it was like 65% of Democrats didn't even want Joe Biden to run. So, I mean, it doesn't really make sense. They're not invalidating because they didn't want him in the first place.
The way I view it is the votes that were cast for Biden were cast for the Biden-Harris ticket. So if Biden isn't on the ticket, I believe it's still a vote for Harris regardless, because he had already identified her as his running mate.
The Democratic messaging has been equally problematic. There's been a ton of praise heaped on President Biden, but only 5 of these respondents say he's worthy of that praise. The rest say things like this.
He would have never stepped down from running the presidency unless they hadn't cut all the money off. He got all the pressure from Nancy Pelosi, Obama, Schumer. They were on him all the time. His wife didn't want him to. She loved the limelight. And and Hunter was pushing him to stay in. That's the only reason, because he had no campaign money. They told him they were cutting it off.
I don't think he did it, because it was the right thing to do. He did it because he had to.
No praise, because I did feel like he was getting a little old and he needed to step down and relax and, live his life.
And only 3 buy the argument that since Biden chose Harris in 2020 to succeed him as a contingency, she's the best choice to replace him now.
Biden didn't choose her to succeed him. He chose her because she gave him the best opportunity to win the election.
So I think it's whatever they want to do, but I think there's better leaders of the country out there.
Should Democrats turn the tables on Republicans and argue now that Trump is too old to serve? 7 respondents said that that's a persuasive argument, and 7 said that it wasn't. Those who think it is persuasive said this.
Because they were both too old in the first place, and we do need a new generation of political leaders.
I look back and the world's different than 10 years ago. So I can't imagine the world that they were growing up in, that they think they know, that they've been separated from for so long, like a Trump or a Biden. And just the topics and all the issues are so much different, and they have to be handled so much differently because they're so used to a lens and a political philosophy that just kind of needs to change with the time.
Those who think it isn't persuasive said this.
It would be hypocritical for the Democrats to attack Trump on age. What are they going to say? For the past year, we've been saying our candidate was, not too old, and now we've decided that he is too old, and now your candidate's too old. That just doesn't hold water as far as I'm concerned.
If it was not an issue for Biden to be 81 up until Sunday, it is not an issue for Trump to be 78. And let's not forget what at 81 Keith Richards is able to do. He too is 81. He performs every night and he's dancing and singing and remembering lyrics. So age is not really the determining factor. It is everything else that comes together.
When it comes to the other huge recent bit of news, the attempted assassination of President Trump, 8 of these Haley voters said it changed their perception of Trump, but for most of them, only temporarily. You see him any differently than you did 10 days ago?
I did right after the convention. And now I kind of wondered, wait a minute, it appears he's going back to the way he was.
I think he was a little more vulnerable, and he had a more human side to him.
Okay. Do you feel that way now 10 days out?
I do. I think he's probably changed, but he's changing back.
Let's talk about running mates. There was generally little familiarity with J.D. Vance. Only 5 had heard of him prior to the Republican National Convention. Only 1 watched his acceptance speech. 9 said his young age and short tenure in office concerned them. 13 were concerned about Vance's isolationist positions. Most respondents said that Harris's choice of a running mate would not persuade them to consider her. But there was one very notable exception. Check out this exchange. Anybody else have a dream person that if she picked them, it would move you closer to Harris? Audrey, you have one?
Well, yeah, if she picked Nikki Haley, and then I would vote. And she could have my vote if she did that.
Really?
If
I
it's a
agree
pie
with
in the
that.
sky, if it's a pie in the sky idea, why not? Talk about a unity ticket. You can't, it would be impossible to beat.
Okay. Show of fingers. I'm asking this with seriousness. If Harris chose Nikki Haley as her running mate, how many of you would vote for a Harris-Haley ticket? 6 of you would. Okay. Do you give up all the objections you had to Harris would go away if she chose Haley?
No, my objections wouldn't go away, but I could stomach them a lot more.
I think it would show that she's willing to moderate, that she's willing to reach across the aisle, that it's going to be, the working together, and that, like, Democrats have always been saying, democracy's on the line, but they haven't done anything to attract my vote. They haven't moderated at all. They haven't shown me that they're willing to do it. So if they pick Nikki Haley, I would know that they're serious, that they're willing to compromise to save democracy. They actually believe it.
Thank you for joining us again this month. Please forward this link to a friend, and please join us again next month.